One choice. One moment. One love story. Welcome to When He Chose Her. Enjoy the story. The saddest kind of loneliness isn't when nobody is around you. It's when everyone sees you, and no one truly notices you. The Grand Regent Ballroom in Manhattan shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers worth more than most American homes. Hundreds of guests filled the room in tailored tuxedos and designer gowns, their laughter blending with the soft notes of a live string quartet. Waiters moved gracefully between tables carrying silver trays filled with sparkling water and elegant hors d'oeuvres. It was the annual Whitmore Foundation Charity Gala, one of the most prestigious fundraising events in New York City. Politicians were there. Celebrity entrepreneurs were there. Major investors had flown in from California, Texas, and Florida. And at the center of it all stood Nathaniel Whitmore, the 38-year-old billionaire whose foundation had donated over $100 million to children's education programs across the country. Nathan looked exactly like the magazines described him. Tall, confident, impeccably dressed in a midnight blue tuxedo. His smile was polished, his handshake firm, and his attention divided among dozens of important conversations. Yet despite all the noise and celebration surrounding him, there was one person in the room he kept glancing toward every few minutes. 9-year-old Lucy Whitmore sat alone at a small round table near the ballroom's massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The city lights reflected against the glass behind her like distant stars. Lucy wore a pale blue dress and matching ribbon in her blonde hair. She looked beautiful. She looked polite. She looked completely invisible. Guests approached her throughout the evening. Some smiled awkwardly. Others patted her shoulder before quickly moving on. A few even crouched down and attempted brief conversations. But every interaction ended the same way. Confusion. Discomfort. Retreat. Lucy was deaf. Most people didn't know sign language. And most people were too uncomfortable to try. So they smiled, nodded, walked away. Lucy had grown used to it. That almost made it worse. She sat quietly tracing circles on the edge of a folded napkin while the rest of the room celebrated around her. A little girl surrounded by hundreds of people, yet somehow completely alone. Nathan noticed it. He always noticed it. But tonight he was trapped by responsibilities. Every few minutes another donor stopped him. Another board member needed his attention. Another photograph was requested. He hated seeing Lucy isolated, but he told himself he would spend more time with her once the speeches were over. Across the ballroom, Clara Bennett balanced a silver tray against one hand while weaving through clusters of guests. Unlike many of the servers working the event, she wasn't intimidated by wealth. She had worked enough charity galas to understand something important. Expensive watches didn't make people more interesting. They only made them easier to identify. At 27, Clara carried herself with a quiet confidence that often surprised people. Her chestnut hair was tied neatly into a low ponytail. Her uniform was simple. Black vest, white shirt, black slacks. Nothing remarkable. Exactly the way she preferred it. She paused briefly near the dessert station and noticed Lucy sitting alone. The little girl's gaze remained fixed on the ballroom floor, while conversations swirled around her like a language she could never enter. Clara followed the direction of Lucy's eyes. She noticed the pattern immediately. Guests acknowledged her. Nobody included her. Something tightened inside Clara's chest. Not pity. Recognition. A memory she rarely allowed herself to revisit. At that moment, one of the gala organizers hurried past carrying a stack of programs. Poor kid, he muttered under his breath. Always looks bored at these things. Clara glanced toward him, then back toward Lucy. No, bored wasn't the word. Lonely was. She quietly set down her tray on a nearby service station. Around her, the ballroom continued buzzing with conversation. Nobody paid attention as a waitress stepped away from her assigned route. Nobody noticed as Clara crossed the polished marble floor toward the small table by the window. And nobody expected what happened next. Instead of speaking from above like everyone else had done all evening, Clara slowly lowered herself onto one knee so her eyes were level with Lucy's. The little girl looked up in surprise. Clara offered a warm smile. Then she lifted her hands. Lucy froze. For a brief second, she simply stared. Clara signed 4 simple words. Hi. Mind if I join you? The napkin slipped from Lucy's fingers. Her eyes widened, then widened even more. Across the ballroom, Nathan Whitmore happened to glance toward the window at exactly that moment. He saw his niece suddenly sit upright in her chair. He saw a smile begin to spread across her face. And for the first time that entire evening, he saw Lucy laugh. For a moment, Lucy simply stared at Clara's moving hands as if she had just witnessed something impossible. Then excitement burst across her face. Her small fingers immediately began signing back, so quickly that even Clara had to laugh softly to keep up. The transformation was instant. The shy little girl who had spent the evening shrinking into her chair suddenly became animated, expressive, and alive. Her hands danced through the air. Her eyes sparkled. Her smile grew wider with every exchange. Guests walking past slowed their steps. A few stopped entirely. They could not understand the conversation, but they could see something remarkable happening. Lucy signed a question. Clara answered. Lucy covered her mouth and laughed. Clara responded with an exaggerated expression that made the girl laugh even harder. Across the ballroom, Nathan watched the scene unfold with growing disbelief. He had spent years trying to create comfortable environments for Lucy. He hired tutors. He funded programs. He donated millions to organizations that supported children with hearing disabilities. Yet somehow a waitress he had never met had accomplished in less than 60 seconds what an entire ballroom full of influential people had failed to do all evening. She made Lucy feel included. Nathan excused himself from a conversation with a senator and quietly moved closer. He did not want to interrupt. He simply wanted to understand what he was seeing. As he approached, he caught sight of Lucy signing enthusiastically about her favorite hobby. Clara nodded and signed back with perfect fluency. Lucy's eyes widened. Then she pointed toward herself in surprise. Clara smiled and signed again. Lucy immediately laughed and nodded. Nathan realized Clara had guessed Lucy's favorite activity correctly. Twice, without speaking a single word. Nearby, two donors exchanged confused glances. One of them whispered, "How does she know sign language that well?" The other shook his head. "No idea, but that little girl looks happier than anyone else in this room." Lucy suddenly pointed toward Nathan. Clara turned and followed the direction of her finger. Their eyes met for the first time. Nathan expected awkwardness. Instead, Clara offered a calm, professional smile before turning back to Lucy. There was no nervousness, no attempt to impress him, no recognition of his status. To Clara, he seemed to be simply another person standing in the room. Oddly, Nathan found that refreshing. Lucy signed rapidly again. Clara listened carefully before bursting into laughter. Lucy joined her. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Lucy immediately pointed toward him while struggling to contain another giggle. Clara looked slightly embarrassed. Nathan walked closer. "Should I be concerned?" he asked with a small smile. Lucy looked delighted. Clara hesitated for a second before answering. "Not really." Nathan folded his arms. "That sounds exactly like something people say when I should be concerned." Clara laughed softly. Lucy signed excitedly. Clara translated. "She says your speeches are longer than her homework assignments." Nathan blinked. Then he looked at Lucy. Lucy nodded proudly. A nearby guest accidentally overheard and nearly choked on his sparkling water, trying not to laugh. Nathan stared at his niece for several seconds before shaking his head. "Well, that is brutally honest." Lucy grinned. Clara signed something back. Lucy laughed again. For the first time all evening, Nathan heard the sound he valued most. Not applause, not compliments, not donor praise. A child's genuine laughter. The string quartet continued playing in the background. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead. Conversations resumed throughout the ballroom. Yet for Nathan, the entire gala seemed to fade into the distance. His attention remained fixed on the waitress kneeling beside his niece. Because the more he watched, the more one question kept returning to his mind. Who exactly was Clara Bennett? Nathan had built a billion-dollar company by noticing details other people missed. Tiny inconsistencies, hidden patterns, small clues that revealed much bigger truths. And at that moment, Clara Bennett had become the most interesting mystery in the room. Lucy signed something enthusiastically. Clara responded without hesitation. The exchange was so natural that it almost looked like they had known each other for years. Nathan stepped closer. "How long have you known sign language?" Clara glanced up. "A while." Nathan smiled slightly. "That sounds like an answer designed to avoid answering the question." Clara returned a polite smile. "Maybe." Lucy immediately signed something toward Clara. Clara laughed. Nathan narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "What did she say?" Clara hesitated. "You might not want to know." Now I definitely want to know. Lucy crossed her arms dramatically and signed the message again. Clara finally sighed. She says you look like someone who schedules fun 6 months in advance. Lucy burst into silent laughter. Nathan stared at his niece, then at Clara, then back at Lucy. That is completely unfair. Lucy shook her head. Clara translated. She says it is extremely fair. For the second time in 5 minutes, Nathan found himself being outnumbered by a 9-year-old and a waitress. Nearby guests were beginning to notice. Several people had quietly gathered within view of the unusual scene. Not because Nathan Whitmore was there. They were accustomed to seeing him. It was because Lucy looked genuinely happy. Nathan suddenly had an idea. A dangerous one. The kind that usually got him into trouble. You seem very confident, he said. Clara raised an eyebrow. About what? Sign language. Clara folded her arms. That is usually how fluency works. Nathan laughed despite himself. Lucy immediately looked delighted by the exchange. All right, Nathan said. Let us test that. Confidence. Clara gave him an amused look. You are challenging a waitress at your own charity gala? I am conducting research. That sounds like billionaire language for challenging a waitress. Lucy was already grinning before Nathan even started. Nathan had learned a handful of advanced signs over the years to communicate with Lucy. Most people never knew that. He raised his hands and signed a phrase involving a complex metaphor about leadership, responsibility, and trust. Clara watched carefully. Then she responded immediately, not only correctly, but with a sharper, more elegant version of the same idea. Nathan blinked. Lucy's grin widened. Lucky guess, Nathan said. Clara smiled. Of course. Nathan tried another. A difficult phrase involving abstract concepts. Clara answered without hesitation. Then she added a humorous observation that made Lucy laugh so hard she nearly slipped out of her chair. Several nearby guests were openly watching now. Nathan felt something unfamiliar. He was losing. Again. Interesting, he said. Clara nodded. Very. You are enjoying this. A little. Lucy signed enthusiastically. Clara laughed. Nathan groaned. What now? Clara looked almost apologetic. She says your face gets funny when you lose. Nathan looked toward Lucy. Lucy nodded proudly. Wonderful. The little girl was now openly laughing at him. The billionaire founder of a global foundation had somehow become the evening's entertainment. Oddly enough, he did not mind. The quartet continued playing softly nearby while conversations slowly resumed around them. Yet Nathan found himself paying attention to only one thing. Clara was not showing off. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was focused entirely on Lucy. Every smile, every response, every gesture came from genuine care. That was what bothered him most. Because authentic kindness could not be bought. It could not be negotiated. It could not be manufactured. And in a room filled with people competing for attention, Clara seemed completely uninterested in receiving any. A staff manager suddenly approached from across the ballroom. Miss Bennett, he said nervously. We need you back on service. Rotation. Clara immediately stood. Professional. Calm. The moment ended as quickly as it had begun. Lucy's smile faded slightly. Clara noticed. She knelt once more and signed a short message. Lucy's face brightened again. Then Clara picked up her serving tray and disappeared back into the crowd. Nathan watched her go. Around him, the gala continued exactly as before. But something had changed. For the first time that evening, he found himself looking forward to a conversation that had nothing to do with money, business, or influence. And for the first time in a very long time, Nathan Whitmore was curious. Most people think curiosity begins with answers. In reality, it begins with questions that refuse to leave your mind. Long after the final speech ended and the last round of applause faded through the Grand Regent Ballroom, Nathan Whitmore found himself distracted. Donors approached him. Reporters requested photographs. Business leaders discussed future partnerships. He responded politely to every conversation. Yet part of his attention remained somewhere else entirely. Specifically, on a waitress named Clara Bennett. Across the ballroom, Clara continued working as though nothing unusual had happened. She refilled water glasses, collected empty plates, offered polite smiles. If anyone had told a stranger that she had just become the center of the evening's most memorable moment, they never would have guessed it from her behavior. She seemed completely unaffected. That intrigued Nathan even more. Most people changed when they realized who he was. Some became nervous. Others became overly friendly. Many suddenly discovered reasons to stay near him. Clara had done the opposite. She appeared perfectly comfortable returning to work. Near midnight, the gala finally began winding down. Guests slowly filtered toward the exits while staff members started clearing tables. Nathan watched as Clara carried a stack of folded linens toward a service corridor. Before he could reconsider, he excused himself from a conversation and followed. The corridor behind the ballroom was quiet. The sounds of the gala faded into the distance. Clara placed the linens onto a storage cart and nearly jumped when she noticed Nathan standing nearby. "Mr. Whitmore." Nathan smiled. "Nathan is fine." "That sounds unlikely." He laughed. "Fair point." Clara folded another tablecloth. "Should you not be saying goodbye to important people?" "I already did." "All of them?" "Most of them." Clara nodded thoughtfully. "That still sounds exhausting." Nathan leaned casually against the wall. "Can I ask you something?" "You are a billionaire. You can ask whatever you want." That was not actually permission. No, but it was realistic. Nathan laughed again. That surprised him. He rarely laughed during business events. "How did you learn sign language?" Clara's hands paused briefly. For the first time all evening, a shadow crossed her expression. Not sadness exactly, more like hesitation. "A long time ago," she said softly. Nathan recognized the familiar signal. A carefully guarded subject. "Fair enough." Clara looked slightly relieved. "Thank you." Most people would have continued pressing. Nathan did not. He knew enough about life to understand that some stories arrived on their own schedule. After a moment, Clara returned to folding linens. Nathan noticed something sticking out of a partially open backpack resting against a nearby chair. A textbook. Thick, worn, covered with handwritten notes. He accidentally caught part of the title. Advanced Linguistic Systems. Nathan frowned. That was not the kind of book most people carried to a catering shift. Clara quickly noticed his glance and slid the book farther inside the bag. "Homework?" Nathan asked. Clara looked almost amused. "Something like that." "Graduate school?" "Not exactly." Another partial answer. Another mystery. Nathan found himself smiling. Clara seemed remarkably skilled at revealing almost nothing while technically answering every question. Before he could continue, one of the event managers hurried into the corridor. "Miss Bennett, we need help loading supplies downstairs." Of course. Clara immediately moved toward the service elevator. The manager left. Nathan watched her gather her bag. Then something unexpected happened. A folded paper slipped from the side pocket and drifted onto the floor. Clara did not notice. She stepped into the elevator and disappeared. Nathan looked down. The paper remained near his polished dress shoes. He bent down and picked it up, intending to return it later. Then his eyes caught the heading. Academic Excellence Scholarship Recipient. Beneath it was a university logo. One of the most respected institutions in the country. Nathan's expression changed. His eyes moved lower. The document listed outstanding academic achievements in linguistics and communication studies. Near the bottom was a date from several years earlier. Then came a single line that surprised him most. Enrollment status, withdrawn. Nathan stared at the page. Slowly, the pieces stopped fitting together. An elite academic record. Advanced textbooks. Professional-level sign language. A waitress working charity events. The story no longer made sense. And whenever something did not make sense, Nathan Whitmore had a habit of finding out why. 3 days later, Nathan discovered that curiosity had a way of becoming a habit. He told himself he was simply returning a document that did not belong to him. That explanation sounded reasonable right up until the moment his driver pointed out that the small cafe across town was nowhere near Nathan's office, home, or any of his usual meetings. Through the front window, he spotted Clara carrying a tray between crowded tables. The cafe was modest. Exposed brick walls, wooden chairs, local artwork hanging slightly crooked on the walls. It was the kind of place where people stayed for conversation instead of appearances. Nathan stepped inside and immediately attracted attention. A billionaire walking into a neighborhood cafe was about as subtle as a fireworks show in a library. Clara looked up from the register and froze for half a second. Then she recovered. "Mr. Whitmore." "Nathan, you really are committed to that." "I am trying." Clara shook her head with a faint smile. "What brings you here?" Nathan held up the folded scholarship document. Clara's eyes widened. "I was wondering where that went. I believe this belongs to you." She accepted it carefully. For a brief moment, something vulnerable crossed her face. Then it disappeared. "Thank you." Nathan glanced around. Busy morning? Clara looked at the packed cafe. Only if your definition of busy includes every customer in Manhattan arriving at the same time. Nathan laughed. Fair point. Before either could continue, a familiar voice interrupted. Uncle Nathan. Nathan turned just in time to see Lucy rushing toward him. She stopped beside Clara and immediately began signing excitedly. Nathan blinked. What is she doing here? Clara signed back while Lucy smiled. Saturday volunteer program upstairs, Clara explained. The cafe lets local organizations use the community room. Lucy signed something rapidly. Clara laughed. Nathan narrowed his eyes. Should I be worried again? Always. Lucy nodded enthusiastically. That is not encouraging. Over the next 20 minutes, Nathan experienced something unusual. He sat at a small corner table while Lucy and Clara carried on entire conversations without him. Every few minutes, Clara translated enough to keep him involved. Not enough to give him an advantage. Just enough to keep him guessing. At one point, Lucy signed something that caused Clara to nearly spill a cup of coffee laughing. Nathan demanded an explanation. Clara refused. Lucy refused. The conspiracy lasted almost 10 minutes before Clara finally surrendered. She says billionaires probably have meetings about how to schedule other meetings. Nathan stared at his niece. Lucy nodded confidently. A customer at the next table overheard and burst out laughing. Nathan rubbed his forehead. I am being bullied by a 9-year-old. A very observant 9-year-old, Clara corrected. As the morning passed, something unexpected happened. Nathan stopped thinking about business. He stopped checking his phone every few minutes. He stopped measuring time and productivity and outcomes. Instead, he found himself listening. Clara spoke about books. Lucy talked about her favorite science projects. The conversations were simple, ordinary. Yet Nathan realized how rarely he experienced ordinary moments anymore. Before leaving, Lucy handed Clara a small drawing she had made upstairs. 3 stick figures stood beneath a giant sun. One had blonde hair. One had brown hair. One wore a suit. Clara smiled warmly. Nathan noticed Lucy had drawn all 3 holding hands. Something about that image lingered in his mind long after they left. As his car pulled away from the cafe, Nathan glanced back through the window. Clara was already helping another customer. Focused. Kind. Unaware that someone was watching. Nathan looked down at the drawing resting on the seat beside him. Then he smiled. Because for the first time in years, one of the most successful men in America found himself genuinely looking forward to next weekend. 2 weeks later, the first real storm did not come from the weather. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon inside an elementary school auditorium. Nathan received the call just after lunch. The voice of Lucy's teacher sounded concerned. Not panicked. Just concerned enough to make him cancel his next meeting immediately. 40 minutes later, he walked into the school and found Lucy sitting alone on a bench outside the auditorium. Her shoulders were slumped. Her eyes remained fixed on the floor. The sight stopped him cold. Lucy was usually resilient, cheerful, curious. She faced challenges every day with a determination that amazed him. Seeing her defeated felt wrong. Nathan sat beside her. What happened? Lucy signed slowly. Her movements lacked their usual energy. Nathan understood enough sign language to catch the basics. Talent show, group project, communication problems, isolation. He felt his chest tighten. The school had organized a student talent showcase. Most children formed teams. Lucy had tried joining one. The experience had not gone well. Nobody had been cruel. In some ways, that made it worse. The other children simply did not know how to communicate with her. They were uncomfortable, unsure. Eventually, they drifted toward easier conversations with other classmates. Lucy ended up standing alone while everyone else practiced together. Nathan looked toward the auditorium doors. Inside, he could hear children laughing and rehearsing. Outside, his niece sat in silence. He hated how familiar the situation felt. Money could build buildings. It could fund programs. It could create opportunities. Yet moments like this reminded him of its limits. On impulse, he opened his phone. A few seconds later, he sent a message. Less than an hour afterward, Clara Bennett walked through the front entrance carrying a canvas tote bag and wearing a simple green sweater. She had come directly from the cafe. Lucy looked up and immediately brightened. Not completely, but enough for Nathan to notice. Clara sat beside her without asking questions, without offering solutions, without pretending everything was fine. She simply listened. Lucy signed for several minutes. Clara watched carefully. Then she signed something back. Lucy frowned. Clara repeated it. Lucy shook her head. Clara smiled and signed it again. This time Lucy laughed despite herself. Nathan raised an eyebrow. What did you say? Clara glanced toward him. I told her that every great inventor spends half their life being misunderstood. Lucy rolled her eyes dramatically. Clara pointed toward her. See? She understood that perfectly. Even Lucy had to smile. A few minutes later, Clara asked to speak with the teacher. Then the principal. Then the coordinator of the talent show. Nathan expected a complicated discussion. Instead, Clara requested something surprisingly simple. 20 minutes. That was all she asked for. Inside the auditorium, dozens of students gathered curiously as Clara stood on stage. She was not there as an expert, not as a lecturer, not as a celebrity, just as someone willing to help. She taught the students a few basic signs. Hello. Thank you. Friend. Nice to meet you. Can I join you? The children picked them up quickly, faster than anyone expected. Soon the room filled with laughter as students accidentally mixed up signs and corrected one another. One boy accidentally signed something completely different from what he intended. The entire group burst into laughter. Even the teachers laughed. Most importantly, Lucy laughed too. By the end of the session, something remarkable happened. Children who had avoided communicating with Lucy earlier were suddenly approaching her. They wanted to practice. They wanted to learn more. They wanted to include her. One by one, conversations began forming. Real conversations. Imperfect. Slow. Occasionally awkward. But real. Nathan stood near the back of the auditorium watching it unfold. He saw Lucy surrounded by classmates. He saw her teaching signs. He saw children paying attention to her instead of speaking around her. Then he noticed tears forming in Lucy's eyes. Not tears of sadness. Relief. The kind that appears when someone finally feels seen. Clara noticed them too. She gently squeezed Lucy's shoulder. No grand speech followed. No dramatic moment. Just a room full of children discovering that connection was easier than they thought. As the afternoon sunlight streamed through the auditorium windows, Nathan looked toward Clara. She was gathering her things quietly, preparing to leave before anyone could make a big deal about what she had done. That was when he understood something important. Clara did not just know sign language. She understood people. And somehow, that was even more rare. Some truths do not reveal themselves all at once. They arrive quietly, piece by piece, until one day they explain everything. A week after the school visit, Nathan sat alone in his office overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Rain tapped softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows while the city lights blurred into silver streaks below. On his desk sat a folder he had promised himself not to investigate further. Clara Bennett. He had respected her privacy. He had avoided asking personal questions. Yet after watching what she had done for Lucy, he could not stop wondering what kind of life had created someone like her. The answer arrived unexpectedly that evening. Nathan attended a small community fundraiser hosted by one of his foundation partners. It was nothing glamorous. No cameras. No luxury ballroom. Just local families gathered in a modest community center. He almost left after his brief remarks. Then he saw Clara standing near a display table covered with photographs. She did not notice him. Her attention remained fixed on a framed picture in her hands. Nathan approached quietly. The photograph showed a teenage boy smiling beside a much younger Clara. They looked remarkably alike. Same eyes. Same warm smile. For the first time since meeting her, Clara appeared completely unguarded. Your brother? Nathan asked softly. Clara looked up. The surprise in her eyes quickly gave way to a gentle smile. She nodded. His name was Ethan. Nathan glanced back at the photo. He looks happy. He usually was. Her voice carried a tenderness he had never heard before. For a few moments they stood in comfortable silence. Then Clara surprised him. You have been trying to figure me out, have you not? Nathan smiled sheepishly. Maybe a little. You are terrible at hiding it. That is disappointing. Clara laughed softly. No, it is actually kind of endearing. Nathan felt strangely pleased by that response. Clara looked down at the photograph again. Ethan was born deaf. The noise of the fundraiser seemed to fade around them. Nathan listened carefully. My parents worked multiple jobs. Money was always tight. Resources were limited. But Ethan never complained. Her fingers brushed the edge of the frame. When I was 14, I decided I was going to learn sign language. At first because I wanted to help him. Then because I loved it. Nathan suddenly understood why every conversation between Clara and Lucy felt so natural. It was not academic knowledge. It was family. It was love. Clara continued quietly. I earned scholarships. Got accepted into one of the best linguistics programs in the country. Nathan nodded. I saw the scholarship document. I figured you might have. She smiled. Then the smile faded. A year later, Ethan became seriously ill. Nathan remained silent. Clara looked toward the window. My parents were exhausted. Medical expenses kept growing. Someone needed to stay home. Nathan already knew how the story ended. Yet hearing it made his chest tighten. You left school. Clara nodded. I thought it would only be temporary. Her eyes lingered on the photograph. But life has its own plans. Nathan looked at her carefully. There was no bitterness in her voice. No anger. Just acceptance. Somehow that made the story even more powerful. And Ethan? He asked gently. Clara's smile returned, smaller this time, but genuine. He taught me more than any professor ever could. The answer told Nathan everything he needed to know. Some people collected degrees. Clara had collected wisdom. A few minutes later, the fundraiser resumed around them. Families laughed. Children ran between tables. Volunteers organized raffle tickets. Yet Nathan found himself unable to stop looking at Clara. Not because of her beauty, though she certainly possessed that. Not because of her intelligence, though she had plenty of that too. It was something deeper. Clara had sacrificed opportunities most people would never walk away from. She had done it without resentment, without seeking recognition, without expecting rewards. And suddenly Nathan understood why Lucy trusted her so completely. Because Clara Bennett knew what it meant to put someone else first. As they stood side by side watching the crowd, Nathan felt a quiet realization settle into his heart. He had first admired Clara because she helped his niece. Then he respected her because of her character. Now, for the first time, he was beginning to wonder whether what he felt was becoming something more. Sometimes a single act of kindness creates a ripple that reaches farther than anyone could imagine. By early spring, what had started as a chance meeting at a charity gala had quietly evolved into something much larger. Nathan found himself thinking less about quarterly reports and more about conversations. Clara found herself spending less time avoiding opportunities and more time accepting them. And Lucy, perhaps more than anyone, became the bridge connecting their worlds. The idea began during a lunch meeting that was never supposed to be important. Nathan, Clara, and Lucy sat together at a small table near the window of the same neighborhood cafe where so many of their conversations had taken place. Lucy was enthusiastically explaining a science project using a combination of signs, drawings, and dramatic facial expressions. Halfway through the explanation, she paused and signed something that made both adults fall silent. Clara looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at Clara. She is right, Clara said quietly. Lucy smiled proudly. Nathan leaned back in his chair. You know, it is annoying when a 9-year-old has better ideas than most consultants. Lucy immediately signed a response. Clara laughed. She says that is because consultants cost too much. Nathan groaned. I created a monster. Yet Lucy's idea refused to leave their minds. What if more children had access to communication programs? What if schools received support for sign language education? What if hearing and deaf children learned together instead of growing up separated by barriers neither side understood? Within weeks, Nathan's foundation began exploring possibilities. What started as a discussion became a proposal, then a project, then an entire initiative. Clara resisted involvement at first. She insisted she was not qualified. Nathan disagreed. Repeatedly. Eventually he won. Mostly because Lucy joined his side. Facing one determined billionaire was difficult enough. Facing a billionaire and a determined 9-year-old proved impossible. Summer arrived. Construction crews transformed an unused community center into a modern communication and learning space. Bright classrooms replaced empty storage areas. Technology designed for accessibility filled the rooms. Families volunteered. Teachers volunteered. Local businesses donated supplies. News outlets began covering the project. Every interview seemed to produce the same question. Who inspired this idea? Nathan always gave the same answer. Clara Bennett. Every single time. The grand opening arrived on a warm Saturday morning. Hundreds of guests attended. Families filled the center. Children ran through hallways decorated with colorful artwork and welcome signs in both English and sign language. Lucy stood proudly near the entrance greeting visitors. She had become the unofficial ambassador of the entire project. Nathan watched the crowd from the stage. Then he noticed Clara standing near the back. As usual, she was trying not to attract attention. As usual, she was failing completely. Nathan stepped to the podium. The room gradually quieted. He spoke about opportunity, about communication, about inclusion. Then he paused. His gaze found Clara. People often assume great changes begin with powerful people making important decisions. He said, "In my experience, they usually begin with someone choosing to care." Clara immediately looked down. Nathan smiled. Several months ago, one person noticed a little girl everyone else overlooked. She did not do it for recognition. She did not do it for praise. She simply did what kindness does. She paid attention. The room followed his gaze. Clara's cheeks turned pink. Lucy looked absolutely delighted. Nathan continued, "This center exists because one person reminded me that listening matters more than speaking. And because of that, countless children will have opportunities they might never have received otherwise." Applause filled the room. Clara looked genuinely overwhelmed. Afterward, as guests toured the facility, she finally approached Nathan. "You did not have to say all that." Nathan smiled softly. "Yes, I did." For a moment, neither spoke. The sounds of children laughing echoed through the building around them. Then Nathan added quietly, "You changed more lives than you realize, Clara." She looked into his eyes. Something warm passed between them. Not dramatic, not sudden, just honest. The kind of connection that grows slowly until one day it becomes impossible to ignore. And for the first time, Clara found herself wondering whether Nathan Whitmore might have changed her life too. 1 year later, the ballroom looked almost the same. Crystal chandeliers still shimmered overhead. Elegant guests still filled the room. Music still drifted through the air. Yet something had changed. The difference could be seen the moment people entered. Near the entrance, children greeted guests using both spoken English and sign language. Conversations flowed naturally between hearing and deaf attendees. Nobody stood alone. Nobody was left out. What had once been an ordinary charity gala had become a celebration of connection. Nathan Whitmore stood near the stage watching it all unfold. The Foundation's communication initiative had expanded far beyond New York. New centers had opened across the country. Thousands of children now had access to programs inspired by one simple act of kindness. Yet despite all the success surrounding him, Nathan found himself focused on only one person. Clara Bennett stood near the back of the room, speaking with several families. She looked exactly the same in the ways that mattered. Kind, calm, unassuming. She still seemed unaware of the impact she had on everyone around her. Nathan smiled to himself. Some things never changed. Across the room, Lucy spotted him and immediately narrowed her eyes suspiciously. At 10 years old, she had become remarkably good at reading people, especially her uncle. She signed something toward Clara. Clara laughed. Then both of them looked directly at Nathan. He instantly became concerned. A few minutes later, Lucy approached him with the confidence of someone carrying important information. She signed rapidly. Nathan frowned. "Absolutely not." Lucy signed again. "I am not nervous." Another sign. "That is completely inaccurate." Another sign. Nathan sighed. "Fine. Maybe a little nervous." Lucy grinned victoriously before disappearing into the crowd. Nathan suspected he had just lost an argument he never agreed to join. Moments later, the evening program began. Guests settled into their seats. Foundation leaders delivered brief remarks. Families shared stories. Children demonstrated sign language lessons they had learned. Then Nathan stepped onto the stage. The room quieted immediately. For a moment, he simply looked around. 1 year ago, he would have delivered a polished speech about growth, impact, and future goals. Tonight felt different. He took a slow breath. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of speaking, Nathan raised his hands. A ripple of surprise moved through the audience. Clara froze. Lucy immediately covered her mouth to hide a smile. Nathan began signing. Slowly at first. Carefully. Every movement carried months of practice. Every gesture carried intention. The room watched in complete silence. He signed about communication, about understanding, about the importance of being seen. Then his eyes found Clara. Everything else seemed to fade away. He continued signing. This time the message was meant for only one person. Clara's eyes widened. Her hands slowly rose to cover her mouth. Nathan signed. "A year ago, one person changed my life." Without realizing it, the room remained silent. Nathan signed again. She taught me that listening is more powerful than speaking. Clara blinked back tears. Nathan smiled. Then he signed the words he had spent months preparing. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with her. A collective gasp moved through the audience. Clara stood completely still. For once, she seemed unable to find words or signs. Nathan stepped down from the stage and walked toward her. Every eye in the ballroom followed. Lucy looked so happy she practically vibrated with excitement. When Nathan reached Clara, he stopped just a few feet away. I spent most of my life thinking success meant building companies, he said softly. Then I met someone who showed me that the most important thing you can build is connection. Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks. Nathan reached into his jacket pocket and revealed a small ring. The ballroom disappeared. The crowd disappeared. For Clara, there was only Nathan, the man who had learned to listen, the man who had become her closest friend, the man she loved. Nathan smiled gently. Clara Bennett, would you do me the incredible honor of spending the rest of your life with me? For one heartbeat, the room stood perfectly still. Then Clara laughed through her tears and nodded. Yes. Applause erupted throughout the ballroom. Families cheered. Children signed congratulations. Several guests wiped away tears. Lucy threw both hands into the air in triumph before signing one final message. Clara immediately laughed. Nathan groaned. What did she say? Clara smiled. She says it is about time. The laughter that followed filled the room. And beneath the glow of the chandeliers, surrounded by the people whose lives they had helped change, Nathan and Clara embraced as a future filled with hope quietly began. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share this video, and let us know where you are watching from, and subscribe to When He Chose Her channel. Your support helps us create more emotional stories about kindness, dignity, unexpected connections, and life-changing moments. Share this video with someone who believes that a single act of compassion can change everything. Join our growing community and never miss another inspiring story. Thank you for watching and being part of the When He Chose Her family.